Coming up on this episode of the Mario Rosenstock podcast.
Tournament poker to me is a thing of absolute beauty. I think it's one of the most beautiful games ever invented. I mean, what the hell is a 60-year-old ex-entrepreneur going to do with his mind? Is he going to sit back and let it rot? Or is he going to take on the young lads and play them in the highest stakes of poker? I know the answer.
What would you do if you set up a company and sold it a few years later for over 25 million euro? Would you book the first flight to Bali and lie on a beach for the rest of your days? Would you buy a load of houses and cars and live the high life? Well, my guest on this episode of the Mario Rosenstock podcast did sell his company for many millions a few years ago, but he then went a slightly different route. He set himself a goal to become a poker player and to one day compete at the renowned World Series of Poker in Las Vegas. And that's exactly what Michael Dwyer has done. He even recently became the #1 ranked poker player in Ireland. The company that Michael founded and then sold was pigsback.com. I'm sure you've heard of it. The highly successful discount deals and rewards website that had all of that attention-grabbing pink and pig-laden branding. So in this episode, Michael and I chat about quitting a safe, pensionable job to start a brand new kind of company, all of the highs and lows of building a business and then selling it for millions. What's it like to compete against the best poker players in the world in Las Vegas? And lots more.
The tide was very in at that stage. .com was really doing well. But then night and day, if the .com boom was all about ready money, the .com bust, which happened within weeks-months of me raising the money, was just pure darkness. And then fortunately, we got a knock on the door from Secret Escapes in the UK. A long conversation at the end of it. He says, Michael, would Pigsback consider selling to Secret Escapes? And I gave him the right answer, Mario. You know what that is?
What's that?
No. I embraced crypto in a big way. I really went down that rabbit hole. I wanted to learn it. It was a new technology. It was exciting. For me, it was like .com all over again. It's very easy to dismiss it, and particularly the older age cohort who are very dismissive of it. But they're not opening their minds to it. They don't really understand it, and they're not putting in the work. You've got to put in the work. In the same year, I was 47th out of 5,000 in the online version of the World Series of Poker for 54 grand.
And is that your biggest payday?
No. You don't know the story, do you?
Woo! No.
Yeah, well, get ready for
Gotta
this
hear
one.
this.
Okay.
All that coming up in just a few minutes right after this. Trump has gone tariff mad, and believe it or not, it's even affecting the Mario Rosenstock podcast sponsorship deal.
Folks, it's me, Donald J. Trump, your favorite president. I've seen lots of bathrooms, believe me. Nobody knows more about bathrooms than I do. Gold-plated toilets in Trump Tower, but nothing, get this, nothing compares to the deals down at Deluxe Bathrooms and Tiles, believe me. They asked me about tariffs. They said, sir, what about, I said, screw tariffs, not on Deluxe. We're talking All-Star, August, super sale, up to 70% off. These guys are smart, and we like smart. Prices have been obliterated, completely obliterated down at Deluxe. Deluxe are making bathrooms great again, folks. 0% tariffs, 0% nonsense, 100% tile domination. Why pay extra for communist radical left-wing bathrooms when you can get your ass up to Dundalk Retail Park or Eastgate Retail Park, Little Island, Cork? It's a little island with big, beautiful bathrooms and tiles. They're deluxe bathrooms, all-star, super August sale. Prices the likes of which they've never seen before.
And the Deluxe Bathrooms.ie August All-Star Super Sale ends on Bank Holiday Monday. So to get down there for up to 70% off Europe's biggest bathroom brands. So Michael Dwyer has a fascinating life story to tell. And we talk all about entrepreneurship, risk and reward, cryptocurrencies and lots more. But as it happens, he's the first poker player that I've had on the podcast. And that's where we kicked off our chat. Michael Dwyer, welcome to the Mario Rosenstock podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here, Mario.
You are the first poker player I've ever had on this podcast. And I must, my listeners might be surprised to hear, but I love poker. And I was playing poker since I was 10 years of age because my grandparents on my father's side were big Galway race people. And that means they play poker on the side of the Galway races. And they taught me as a youngster how to play poker. And I've always enjoyed poker. as opposed to gambling, which some people who listen to this podcast know that I have very big issues with online gambling. Yeah. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, no, happy to talk about that. I think it's important to talk about that.
Yeah.
In fact, if you want to talk about that right now, we'll talk about it because, you know, there's two forms of gambling. There's reckless gambling and this kind of, you know, repetitive, senseless, mindless gambling. That's very nasty and it's got very bad outcomes, you know. But I don't think we should just talk about it. I think it needs to be talked about in the schools. I think it needs to be talked about at home, you know. Like many other addictions, you know. I mean, you know, like harmful gambling.
Social media addictions,
shopping addictions, you know.
Pornography addictions.
Pornography, you know, cigarettes, whatever the hell, drugs, obviously. There's so much of it, you know. But it's far better that we actually talk about these things and equip our kids with an understanding of them. So I would say, you know, first of all, repetitive, mindless gambling, just this kind of, I'm backing every race and Paddy Power. Well, God bless you, you're going nowhere, and unfortunately, it's likely to end very badly for you and your family. And we should do our best to prevent that. And when we see signs of that in people, we should advise them to seek help. And they can get help, and help does work.
And a lot of the corollaries of the offshoots of mindless, degenerate gambling, if you like, leads to crime, leads to robbing your parents, robbing your brothers, robbing your sisters, borrowing money off people and never paying them back, stealing and lying, basically, and ultimately destroying yourself, losing your house, losing your car, losing your job, and all that sort of stuff.
And I would say, God bless anybody who is afflicted by an addiction that leads to these things.
Yes.
They are the victim themselves, but they create further victims along the way. So the sooner we address these things, rather than stick our heads in the sand and pretend they're not there, we need to be talking about these things at home and in schools.
Correct.
On the other hand, I'd say there's what's life without risk? If we try to live life without risk, we don't progress as human beings, you know.
But I think that it's fair to say, and I think you're on. I think already I can intercept what you're saying. I think it's fair to separate the idea of risk from mindless gambling. Mindless gambling,
100%.
Mindless gambling is completely different to educated or pre-thought out risk.
Yes, exactly. So while I would teach the dangers of mindless gambling, I would also teach the basics of game theory, and in particular the concept of what is EV, expected value, positive or negative. If we consider EV in every decision we make in life, EV is this in the long run, if I repeat this behaviour in the long run, or if I make this type of decision in the long run, is the outcome for me over the long run likely to be positive? And if the answer to that is yes, you're on to a good thing. If the answer to that is no, you need to look at the data again, you need to reconsider what you're at, you need to review it, and you need to make a different decision and change your behaviour. So if we could just think about this EV positive versus EV negative outcome and embrace that in our decision making, we'd all be better at embracing risk.
Okay. I want to rewind for a minute, because now that we've started this, we call this the prologue, because we've established that you're a professional poker player. We've established that poker playing is not the same as mindless gambling, as we'll find out later. But we want to rewind because, Michael, you're not just a poker player, because your genesis, this way you started, is you started as a working person, but your father had an entrepreneurial streak in him.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, my father was actually from a very, very modest, poor background in Cork. My mother's from Cork as well, but my dad, he always found it very difficult to criticise the Christian Brothers. Whereas, you know, when the whole country was giving them a lash, and rightly so, for, you know, some of the abuses that went on, not just there, but in many lay and religious schools. Okay. But he found it difficult because he owed them his education. He said one brother came to their house when, you know, in those days people did the intercert, the junior cert. Right. And for many that was it. They went out into the world of work. But this brother came along to the house and he said, Mrs. Dwyer, she said, we think Fancy, Florence Alphonsus, where they no money, but they're great names. We think Fancy will get the leaving cert in a year if you give him the chance for the year, and we'll waive the fees, Mrs. Dwyer. You know, there used to be fees in those days. And She did, and he managed to get his leaving cert in a year, and he got a job in the post office, and subsequently he got a job in the revenue commissioners. And he was a great man for, he'd MC events. He was an amateur actor. He used to credit Father O'Flynn, who he had the Loft Theatre in Cork, where he took people from the just very much ordinary backgrounds. There was no socio-demographic screening for this, and he brought them through Shakespearean plays. And Dad developed a great love of acting, a great love of the stage, and it served him so well in later life. So he gets a call from his boss. He said, Alf, they're looking for people to move around the country to help with this new thing called PAYE, pay as you earn. They said they'd like you to move to Dundalk and to see if you could help them there. And he joked subsequently, he said, I went, but PAYE never quite caught on up there. So in El Paso.
No offence to the people of Dundalk now.
Not at all.
Who are very, very well respected tax-paying citizens.
Absolutely. And he spent the rest of his life there. And, he himself, my mum, the whole lot of us had a marvellous life in Dundalk. And he really owes a lot to the town, owed a lot to the town. My late dad, as it is now. But he subsequently set up his own tax consultancy.
Okay.
He sort of, as he said, he was a hearer of confessions.
Okay. And maybe it was in the genes, because you yourself then worked normally and worked in professions, but you then decided to embark and become an entrepreneur yourself.
I think you're right. I think it's in the genes, but it was a value at home. We were taught to admire the entrepreneurs around us. Like Dad he worshipped the entrepreneurs in the community. He thought they were great to sort of create the opportunity for people. And good luck to them. Well done them. They deserve to reap whatever benefits they get. So we were brought up with that attitude that you get nowhere without a risk. We're back to risk, but that, admire the risk takers. It's tough on them when it doesn't work out. So when it does, they deserve what
that must have been an uncommon attitude to hold back then in Ireland. I mean, Ireland was very conformist, and I can't see. I mean, in a country that was, let's say, embraced or say enraptured to the Catholic Church, I can't see people jumping outside the flock being necessarily as trusted.
I suppose they were the generation that benefited from education, really valued education, wanted us all to get an education, wanted us all to do well. They didn't have super opportunities themselves, but they really wanted them for us, and we got them. Okay, I'm thinking back on the 80s and the 90s. Things were very, very tight in Ireland, but nonetheless, it was changing. There were opportunities, and I mean, once we get into the late 90s and beyond, look at Ireland now. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure they weren't planting seeds of dreams and aspirations in us all.
Okay. And you briefly tell me about your working life before you then set up this pretty famous and a very famous company.
Yeah, I mean, I was blessed, really, in so many ways. I have to say that now. There were tough periods, but my first job was actually with a company called Abbey Meat Packers in Northern Ireland, but it was part of agri trading. And I'll just tell you a quick story out of that. I used to get the bus up there on a Sunday night. So I'm a 21-year-old kid, and I get the bus and it would go through an area called what was it called? Was it Newcastle or something like that? But I think it was where Bobby Sands grew up and was the family were sort of, pushed out of, So I'd be hiding the accent, going through 50p, please, this kind of way. And I got to the security gates one night. So I shared a house on the grounds of the huge factory, Abbey Meat Packers in northern Belfast, with a guy who was a manager. I was only, I suppose, just starting off, and the guy at the gates was a good. I assumed he was a good Scots Presbyterian, Jimmy, and he says, Michael, sit down there, and he offered me a cigarette, which was very unlike him, so I knew something was wrong. He says, Michael, someone tried to burn your house down at the weekend. And I said, what, Jimmy? He says, I don't think it's too bad, And I said, well, are you going to walk up with me? And he said, I know I have to stay here, but here's a torch. So he gives me a torch, and I walk up the lane to the house. And I get there and the electricity's off. There's a smell of smoke, but I kind of go down. He told me that it was the garage, that basically had the garage attached to the house that was attacked. So I opened the door to the garage, and sure enough, it's burnt out and whatever, and the smells of it. I closed the door pretty quickly, but I'm still in the dark with my torch. And next thing, the phone rings, and I go make my way to the phone. I pick up the phone, and I go, I hardly say anything, and I hear, this is the UDA. you have 10 minutes to leave the premises.
Jesus.
And I'm going, Jesus, I'll be gone in one, you know. And I looked down and there was a phone extension and there was a direct line and the call had come through the phone extension, which had to come through security. And next thing I hear a guy go, "Oh, Michael, it's Jimmy. I got you there. Just ringing to say the trip switch is in the hot press." Oh, listen, that was enough. I left I joined Jacob's Biscuits on the Bellegarde Road for a much more sedate experience, an experience that was much more in line with what I was interested in from my college days, which was branding. And so we went on to Chocolate Kimberley, on to Shake a Shamrock in Italy. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I do, yeah.
1990 World Cup.
I do.
Some great experiences there.
But the genetics kicked in like your dad before you, and something the itch was scratching.
That's right.
And you needed to scratch the itch of entrepreneurialism. And you set up, like, it's such a famous company, Pigsback.
Yeah.
.com.
I know. I waited till I was 35, by the way, in 1999, and I'd spent 15 years in the food industry at that stage. And just this wave of change was happening, the whole .com era.
That's right.
And I said, look, if you're ever going to do it, it's now.
Yeah, so you felt this is now or never.
Now or never, literally, you know.
Take a risk, you were saying.
The one thing you do learn, take a risk, and also, you know, you're kind of looking for a wave of change, because within waves of change, there are opportunities.
Yes.
Nobody said they were easy, but there are opportunities. So I said, look, I've got a bit of a reputation. I'll be able to raise a few quid, and I'm going to throw myself at this. And I was coming back on a flight from London to Dublin, reading an author called Seth Godin, who's writing about a thing called permission marketing, the idea that they don't interrupt us, that we should be seeking permission. We should have a clear understanding of what relationship we have with brands, instead of them putting up these pop-up ads in front of us and sending us unwelcome email, etc., etc. I said, like, that's excellent. That's the way it should be, you know. So I eventually scribbled down this idea for what must be the first marketplace in Ireland, which was, on the one hand, we would have brands on one side, on the other side we'd have consumers, and we'd be in the middle like a curator or a gatekeeper, and we'd be trying to judge what the best content from the brands was to go to the consumers, okay? And initially I called it all sorts of things, I'll try that.com and Hello Points Limited, when I was a bit obsessed by points. But eventually we came up on the name, you know, you're onto a good thing, you're on the Pigsback.
Great name.
Pigsback.com.
Great name.
And that was it. So on the back of that I raised 1.8 million. There was
when you raised 1.1 million, are they from venture capitalists?
No, not at all. It was, you know, it was family, it was friends, it was,
really?
You know, and punters. Now, you got to remember, like, the tide was very in at that stage. You know, .com was really doing well, and boy, was it about to change, but nobody knew that. So people wanted opportunities. There was FOMO, there was greed, you know, and people wanted to be in on the next big thing, and they thought maybe Dwyer is going to deliver the next big thing. So it wasn't that difficult to get the money at that stage. But then night and day, you know, if the .com boom was all about ready money, the .com bust, which happened within weeks - months of me raising the money, was just pure darkness. And it was it was an
and of course your business was going to be completely reliant.
No, and you know, all of a sudden, honestly, I felt like a pariah. I was that idiot who was caught up in that internet thing, and had given up his great
like
job.
Bitcoin,
you
or
know,
something.
It'll never catch on. Honestly, the crypto lads have felt the same thing, you know. So but you know, so I knew that this money that I originally thought would have to, we really had very ambitious plans. We were going to go to Australia, we were going to go to France, we were going to go to Britain, blah blah blah, and they had to be all put on hold. There was no way anything like this was going to happen. And the little bit of money we had, it wasn't a little bit, it was a substantial amount of money, but little in the context of the ambition we had. It was going to have to last way longer, because there was you know, the whole money raising area was now barren. You know, the same people who wanted to give us money now didn't want to talk to us. Literally, you know, would almost walk to the other side of the street in case I asked them for money.
Did you keep proceeding with the idea then?
Kept proceeding with it, you know, and I had great co-founders, a chap called Rory Duggan from Cork, and John McDonald, Johnny Mack, who's a key character in the book as it emerges. They were great guys to work with. Rory just looked after the money, and Johnny Mack looked after the tech and the operations and whatever not. And between the three of us, you know, we really stuck at it. And we got a young guy called Gareth Lamb. You might know the name. Gareth Lamb went on to be the head of Meta, had a huge job, you know, and he's a very successful career, which continues to this day. But Gareth was a young lad. He joined us, and you know, he and I sort of developed the front end of the business, the customer bit, the product bit, the marketing bit together. And we did very, very well, really, when I think about what we were up against. But within about 18 months, we managed, was it 18 months? Might have been a bit
And you were about 35 at this point, Michael.
Yeah, I was 35 starting off. So, funny, my daughter has a little, my two daughters they've co-founded a fashion rental business called Droby, we may maybe come back to that. But Nikki said to me, she said, Dad, I know I'm only 25, but I really want to go with this business. What do you think? And I said, well, I left it at 35. I had the benefit of structures and process and all that kind of experience. But you know what? You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have battles. You're going to have a lot of personal stresses. You're better off to get into it now and get on with it. And you'll learn all the other things.
Learn on the job.
Yeah, and there's plenty of people around who will act as mentors and advisors.
And
so
did you have a family during this period?
Yes, I did. Yeah, my wife Karen was a saint. I remember her father was very unimpressed. We were married, we were probably married, say, 5 years at this stage. We had 2 girls and soon to be another one on the way. Yeah. And we had just moved house. Yeah. So it was a lousy time to do it. But,
And for example, did they think you were a bit mad to be leaving a pensionable job and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, well, that's my mother. My mother, Michael, you're leaving that great pension car with the company car and a lovely bonus and a great salary, God, you'll hate her if you talk to her like that. Yeah. But, but that is it, It was a traditional Irish attitude you were getting. And you know what? It's an attitude for a reason. These things are great virtues. And you look how well corporate Ireland looks after itself. Why the hell would you leave it? But that's not what I wanted. It wasn't fulfillment for me. Yeah. Karen's father, he's a career banker and he's going, you're gambling with your career and your family, right. And it was very, very strong. Yeah. And Karen leapt to my defence and she said, look, I know the Michael I'm married. Yes. And I don't want to be married to a frustrated middle-aged Michael. He needs to do this to her eternal credit. And once he bought into it. Yes. He bought into
fair
it.
Play.
He was a great support. Absolutely.
Yeah. Fair play. I remember there's a quote that about going for what you love, go for your dream. And it was this idea. I think it was Jim Carrey was saying it in his. I said this before on the podcast. He said it at a commencement speech for students, and he went, "I'll tell you why you should go for your dream. I'll tell you why you should go for your dream, and that is because if you decide to go for second best, right, you might fail at that as well." So why not fail at the thing that you really wanted to go for?
I remember speaking to a group of master students in Galway last year and just talking about the entrepreneurial experience and whatever. But there was one thing I said, which I said it quite casually, But as I looked at the idea, I said, God, this is actually a very good idea, And then I'm looking around me going, well, God almighty, Michael, this is it's big. Do you know, how the hell are you going to manage this? You know nothing about technology or databases or,
But other people do.
Exactly. Yeah. But then I just sort of said to myself, the words I used were, why not me? Why not me?
Good one. Why not me?
And a couple of people came up to me and then they said, oh, I love the why not me, because they're thinking of their own situation and the business they're maybe thinking of doing or the move they're thinking of or risk they're thinking of taking. And they're going, well, why not me?
Yeah, I saw another one. There's a lot of them come from Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Right. And I saw one from him and he went, why do so many people just tacitly accept the world that they're brought into? Yeah. Basically, most of us accept this is the world. It's like a bubble. Yeah. And I have my place within the world, which is already super ordained. I will go to school. I will go to college. I will have a wife. I will have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I will have kids. I will do a job and I will die. They feel not very compelled to change that idea within a bubble. And he said, try and see yourself as living within a place which was created by people who weren't any brighter than you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have the power to go in and move that needle if you want. Why shouldn't you move the needle? Yeah. Why shouldn't you move the needle? And that's related to why not me?
100%.
Why shouldn't you see yourself as a person who can change the course of events in the world around you?
Do you know what's amazing? I remember hearing somebody say that, you take Gates, you take Jobs. There were probably a few other people who came into that cluster. There was a cluster of people who were very, very bright, obviously, but who happened upon the computing space.
Correct.
In the early stages of the computing space. And, they rode that wave, and by golly, did they ride that wave, and they created amazing things, whatever. But there is an argument that if it happened 10 years later, it would have been a very different cluster of people, but it would have been a cluster of people.
Correct.
And why not them?
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, Malcolm Gladwell talks about this a lot.
Right.
The idea that why was Bill Gates Bill Gates? Well, first of all, he wasn't born in the Congo. Eliminate that. Where was he born? He was born in the western seaboard of the United States. What's so special about that? Well, it was 1960-something. What's so special about that? Well, the first computers were being thing. What's so special about that? Well, Bill Gates went to college. Where? In the one university that was offering the students after hours until 3 o'clock in the morning. Who else was around there? Oh, a man called Steve Wozniacki. Who's he? The guy who invented Apple. With Bill Gates. Do you get a picture here? So right place, right time, right socioeconomic environment. But also, as you say, you have to be those people. Those people were amazingly brilliant people who were obsessed as well. But it was funny about the idea that he was able to go into the college. It was the only place in the college in America where they'd keep it open till 3 or 4 in the morning. And you could go in all night and work on the circuit boards and all that sort of stuff. So you got to do what you loved. And you did love it, and you ran it for 25, 30 years.
Yeah, I ran for 20 years. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I loved all of those 20 years. I mean, by golly, did we hit the rocks. Our original business model, it was working very well till the credit crunch happened. So all those guys who were promising us budgets, they've either been laid off, their departments are gone, the budgets are gone, the accountants have taken over. So what's going on? And before we know it, things are crashing around us. We'd gone into Canada. I remember getting this amazing phone call from Sean O'Leary. He says, hello, Michael, I'm Sean O'Leary. I'm the Vice President of Bell New Ventures. We're looking for the future of smart advertising, and we think Pig's Back is that. And I'm thinking, which one of my friends is capable of doing a Mario Rosenstock here? And I actually insisted on ringing the guy back, which he found very funny, and I did, and I established his credentials. And Sean was from Cork. His family was from Cork originally. He was very proud of his Irish connection, so they were useful. Within about 6 months, long story short, we did a licensing deal, and it was a huge deal. Bell were going to spend 60 million on the launch of Pig's Back across Canada, preceded by a regional launch, and then they had a plan to spend up to 200 million on the launch of it in the USA. But of course, what happens? These black swan events, these things that you can't anticipate, but most businesses are hit by them. Bell enter merger talks with TELUS to form a united biggest telco in Canada. It would have been the world's biggest merger if they went through with it. A year later, it didn't go through due diligence, and probably because of the whole economic circumstances that were then prevailing. But at the time, they assumed it would. They appointed a new chief executive whose first act was to put a line through all new ventures because they were consuming cash at a time when they'd be taking on this expensive finance. So that was a horrific time. We had to pull back from Canada, pull back from Britain, and Ireland was being hit really hard. So all these budgets that we were getting from big marketing departments were collapsing. So what the hell were we to do? We had to cut our staff roughly by 80%. It was a really, really tough time. We were like, oh God, we were really struggling with liquidity, cash flow, struggling with solvency. We eventually did an emergency round. Some of our shareholders supported us. Many of them didn't. That's normal. That's what happens in these things. Those who didn't got diluted. Those who did got what turned out to be very cheap shares, but we didn't know that at the time. And we recentered our business in Ireland around this new thing called Daily Deals. Groupon had come into Ireland, and we said, right, okay, well, they're broadly in our territory, but they're doing it a very interesting way. They're not asking for marketing fees. They're actually taking a cut out of the deal. So what we did over the following 5-6 years was we did that in a Pig's Back way, which was a more upmarket way. We had an older audience. They were more affluent. They're capable of spending a few quid in the hotels when they went there. So the hotels and restaurants soon wanted our customers over the other ones. So we won market share that way. And just cut a very long story short, some of our competitors, and there were too many, started to blink, and we were able to buy them quite cheaply. We really had very little money now, Mario, but we were able to buy the first one on a sort of a phased payment basis, and it paid for itself within, I would say, 3 months. We didn't expect that to happen, but it was phenomenal what happened. So then we bought another one and another one and another one, and we ended up taking our sales in Ireland from 7 million gross sales. We obviously weren't keeping 7 million, but we were maybe keeping 1.5 million of it, to 27 million over a phase of just 2 to 3 years. And then fortunately, we got a knock on the door from Secret Escapes in the UK. I remember getting a call from Jean-Charles Lacoste, French guy working for Secret Escapes. And a long conversation at the end of it. He says, Michael, would Pig's Back consider selling to Secret Escapes? And I gave him the right answer, Mario. You know what that is?
What's that?
no.
Is that the good right answer?
That's the right answer. Yeah, absolutely.
That means he knows that you're worth it.
Exactly. But we did arrange to meet 2 weeks later in London. So there was a follow-up and I went along to that London meeting. But, in hindsight, the best thing that happened, I had really engaged with my competitors, to learn about their business. I found my competitors very open to discussions. When I say competitors, they were competitors in different markets or indeed competitors at home. And it's a tip I'd give any young entrepreneur, talk to the people in your industry. They're open to it, they love it. And, you think they're going to meanly go out and kind of, use the information you've given them to exploit you, but they don't, So I ended up with 2 bidders and we got a very fair price.
Brilliant. And my notes, because it's only my notes, tell me that you sold it for 25 million euro. Is that right?
It is right. But remember, we had 136 shareholders accumulated along the way. So they all deserve their share of the spoils.
And here we are coming to the second half of the podcast, really, because this is where your life changes. I mean, you decide to not continue with business. Tell me about poker. Tell me about what attracted you to poker.
Look, I mean, we spoke briefly beforehand, and I know you're a poker player.
I'm not a poker player, but I grew up. I grew up with my family teaching me how to play poker because they used to have schools on the side of Galway races.
I mean, that's like my mum and dad used to invite their friends over, like couples over, and they'd play poker together. And, we'd have Sunday night games. We played all sorts of games. What do you call it? We used to call it Beg My Neighbour. I think they call it Beggar My Neighbour.
Beggar My Neighbour.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And all those games, all these stupid games, Brag and blah, 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 blah. We all played all of these things. Yeah. They kept us amused, and they were great, But poker, I suppose, once money is introduced, it becomes more serious and it's more captivating, whatever not. I think I was a pretty poor poker player as I was growing up because I never educated myself in it and I was probably a bit too loose. I got better and better, but only after getting wounded a couple of times, severely wounded, where I'd resolve. And this is often what happens in life, we take one good kick in the guts and we either say we're walking away from it or we're going to correct our ways, we're going to really learn the thing, and then we're going to come back with discipline and apply it. So that's probably what I did. But in the course of the business, I had very few opportunities to play poker, really. But any opportunity I got, I took. My brother John is a very good poker player. Harry's another good poker player. But John gave me a few opportunities. I remember when he had money and I had none, he brought me to the World Series of Poker, And
why did he bring you?
He knew I'd love it, Mario. And
he wasn't playing. He was just.
Oh, he was playing too. Yeah, but
he was playing.
He was playing as well.
So he was playing in the World Series of Poker.
Yeah, the World Series of Poker. It's a series, so there's many different events. You can play events from. I mean, it's crazy. There's an event at 1 million a pop. And there are events.
When you say 1 million a pop, you buy in
literally an entry of 1 million a pop. Now, all of these people
to win what potentially?
I suppose maybe the winner might get 25 million
oh my God.
Or something like that. Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's out of the world.
And you can buy in at a very low level as well.
You can buy in at a very low level,
low?
Yeah. I think the lowest single event in the World Series of Poker is $500.
$500 buy-in.
And $500 in America doesn't get you an awful lot. It hardly gets you a night in a hotel.
Exactly.
So,
but I suppose you could win, what, 7,000?
No, you could probably win $1 million, more than $1 million. Yeah, there was one I played. I was out for over a week, which coincided with the Bitcoin conference that I was just too curious. I had to, this was too much of a, serendipity. The Bitcoin conference and World Series of Poker on in Vegas, first week of June, first week of, where am I now? First week of June, I had to be there. So I went there, I came back, I've been home 2 weeks and I'm going off again on Friday. I won my first one, which meant I was in the money because, they pay sort of roughly speaking 15% of the field. In this case, they paid a winner of each table. So for our $3,000, I had half, he had half. We got 10 grand.
Right.
Absolutely.
So now you're playing with their money.
We had the 10 grand in the back pocket. And of course, what do we do that night? Harry was there as well. We went to the piano bar in the Wynn and we had a lovely time. I probably drank one or two too many. Went into the game the next day. I did rather well. I was knocked out in third. But had I made it beyond that, had I won that table, I'd have been on a final table at the World Series of Poker, which would have been an absolute dream. Yeah. But what happened was a dream anyway. So look, that was that. There was very little more poker for me, going through the hard times of the business. But I kept studying poker. I played a bit of poker online. Yeah. I got a few successes here and there. Yeah. And then once basically we sold the business, I said, this is something I have time to develop. I'm going to get coaching. Yeah. I have had a couple of poker coaches who work on the sort of the technique side of things with me. And this morning I had a meeting with my mental game coach. I don't know if you've ever heard of a fellow called Andy Black, but he's the winning most Irish player ever. Yes, and he spent a long time off in a Buddhist retreat. Right. And I'm sure he's some form of Buddhist monk.
A mental coach for poker.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's the most exacting game mentally, like the stamina of 12-hour sessions, against lads who are almost always half your age and younger, Is
it a young man's game?
Something. When I meet the young lads and they're all, gung ho about becoming a professional poker player, like I really, I'm kind of the party pooper. I said, don't do that, you idiot. I said, finish your education, get yourself a job, and if you're really good enough at poker, play it at weekends and win a few quid, build up a record that way, and let's see where you go.
Just a quick question about being a young man: is testosterone, which young men have more testosterone?
Yeah.
Does testosterone make them more risky and therefore more dangerous or more loose or more?
I think if they're testosterone led, they're likely to sort of do these fanciful all-ins once or twice too often. They'll blow up essentially. The really dangerous players these days are what I call humanoids. These are the lads who are studying GTO, game theory optimal poker, off computers. They have these amazing memories, and they rote learn all the correct hands and how to play them from various positions. Wow. Okay, and this is kind of scary, and like there are now bots online that you're playing against, so you need to be very careful what site you're playing on and what the rules are in relation to these things, etc., etc. So I haven't encountered them, but I know they're there. They're definitely there.
So when you're playing online, you're hoping to play against humans.
Exactly. Yeah.
But sometimes you have to be wary.
You have to be very wary.
How do you know you're not playing against bots?
Well, the site I principally play on is called GG Poker, and at the higher end games they insist on real names.
Yes.
And they don't allow a lot of the sort of poker aids, the software aids that other sites would allow. So I think their governance is good.
Wow.
And PokerStars, which is owned by Flutter, their governance is likely to be very good as well. Right. So I respect them. Right. So they're the two sites I principally play on. I mean, some of the American sites are kind of tacitly going along with this, because they say, well, it's introducing a bit of liquidity. I don't like it, So I'm the old guy. And I've studied GTO and I've got my coach who's teaching me GTO. But what I've learned is how to exploit GTO. So GTO assumes we all play the same way around the table, that we're all the humanoids, but we're not. So I love when I get at a table where there's maybe a couple of these pro, but there's a couple of old lads like me, and there's a couple of young lads, and there's a couple of tourists, and there's one maniac, because you have to adjust to each of those players. So you don't just play your hand, you play the player. You play your position at the table. There's a lot of psychology at play, but there's a lot of adjustment at play. So it's that ability to adjust and play exploitative poker that makes the difference. And I love that. And I can just tell you this much. I'm sure it's not testosterone, but I have no lack of kahunas when it comes to poker.
Okay.
If I sense a weakness in the other player, I'll put him to the sword.
So you see it. So you see it for what it is, which for you it's a hugely strategic game, involving deep thought and deep analysis, and which of course is anathema to mindless, risky gambling.
Absolutely.
It's thought out.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's
planning. It's planning.
It's very strategic. It's very tactical. It's very. I mean, it's kind of weird. You have to be deceitful. You're all the time trying to deceive the other player. Yes means no, no means yes. Well, yes means yes because you might think it means no.
Right. Right.
So it's chess-like in that way. In fact, there was an organisation a few years ago, and they were really lobbying hard to introduce two games to the Olympics. One was chess, and the other was tournament poker. Cash poker, you can tell I'm not in love with it because I think it's more in the degenerate side of gambling. There's more hustling involved, and there's probably more damage involved. Whereas tournament poker to me is a thing of absolute beauty. I think it's one of the most beautiful games ever invented, and it's a beautiful thing to immerse your brain into. I mean, what the hell is a 60-year-old ex-entrepreneur going to do with his mind? Is he going to sit back and let it rot, or is he going to take on the young lads and play them in the highest stakes of poker? I know the answer.
Yeah, how interesting. Are there a couple of older men than you, or women?
There are, yeah, indeed there are, but not many. You know, Phil Hellmuth, who's one of the famous players, the poker brat. You know, he looks like a professional basketball player. And he goes around with the big earphones and bigger personality, and he's bold and brash at the table. You know, so Hellmuth declared this year that he wasn't going to play the main event of the World Series of Poker because it was very unfair on anybody 60 plus. Okay, so of course Darragh O'Kearney, who's a well-known Irish poker author and podcaster, for two Irish guys worth knowing, two Irish guys, David Lappin and Darragh O'Kearney, run the biggest poker podcast in the world called The Chip Race. Immensely successful and very entertaining, well worth listening to. But Darragh and I both resolved, well, if Hellmuth wasn't going to do it, we were going to get really fit and we were going to do it. And we were going to prove him wrong, which will be very difficult. Because what happens is you play day one and then you'll get a break and you'll play day two. If you get through to day two, 60% of the field get through to day two. And if you get through day two, because there's so many in the field, they have to split up the days, you'll get to day three. At day three, they bring all of the fields together. So 10,000 players start. They start them in 4 different day ones, 2 different day twos, but 1 day three, and then it moves on from there. From day 3 on through to day 10, I think it is, you get no breaks. So it's 10-hour days all the time and so much adrenaline coursing through your system.
Yes.
So for the last 3 years, I've gone day 5, which is well into the money. I got 200, and I think it was 247, something like that out of 10,000. The following year is
how much did that
something.
pay?
That paid 48 grand.
Wow.
It wasn't bad, but all the big money was around the corner. In the same year, I was 47th out of 5,000 in the online version of the World Series of Poker for 54 grand.
Wow.
And I got my ticket for $100 because I won a satellite to it.
Wow.
So a satellite is where, 10 of us pay, or maybe whatever.
And is that your biggest payday?
No. You don't know the story, do you?
Woo! No.
Yeah, well, get ready for
Gotta
this
hear
one.
this.
Okay, GG Poker. This was last year, literally this time last year, literally a year ago. Karen and I had been, we spent a lot of time in Connemara, in Clifton, which we love. And we'd been entertaining a few people. We'd been busy for various reasons. I said, Karen, we're going home this weekend. I'm going to play a bit of poker. There's a big series on GG. And, hope that's okay with you. No problem at all, And I remember lodging $1,000. And I said, look,
Online,
onto GG Poker. And I entered, I love these satellites, okay, and I don't know why, but I have a great record at them, and it's probably largely thanks to Darragh O'Kearney, who wrote a book about them, which I ate and digested, ate again and redigested. So I really knew the sort of recommendations, the techniques that are involved in this thing. So I ended up winning the first satellite I played, which was $150 to $1,000 event. Now, I didn't win that event, but I won about $7,000. So I said to Karen, woohoo, come with me. This is a great weekend, okay? And I said, I'm going to play a satellite into a couple of other things. So I played a satellite into the big event.
What is it? So just quickly, what's a satellite? So
a satellite is where 10 people put in 1/10 of the price of a ticket each, and one of them wins the ticket.
Oh, okay? So you're sort of in a large gamble together going, one of us will make it.
Exactly. Only one of us will make it.
And we're happy with that.
So like if there's 100 people enter the satellite, then there's 10 tickets. 50 people enter, there's 50 tickets.
So one of you get a golden ticket, basically.
So exactly, that's it. So I entered one of these satellites, and again, I didn't win it, but there were 3 tickets. I was 4th. So that meant I didn't get a full ticket, but I got the loose change, and the loose change was about 5 grand. So I'm going, I've just won 7 grand, now 5 grand, less if you cost, but I'm going great guns here. And I fired 2 more at it, and eventually I won a ticket to the GG Millions, Super Millions event, guaranteed for 10 million in total prize money. Okay. I had never played anything like this online. Live I had, but not online. So I it threw me straight away. It had started, but they were still running satellites. And there's a thing called late entry. You can enter to a certain level and they stop you from entering, obviously. Okay. So it was late entry. There were about 60% of the field left, which also meant that my chips were the equivalent of 60% of average. Okay. So if I survived that day, I made it into the money, but making into the money was making $26,000 minimum. Okay. So I kind of, up, down, nothing particularly significant, and I make it to the money. So I go, yeehaw, we've got $26,000 wrapped up on top of the $7,000 on top of the whatever, So I was really, really happy. And I played very conservatively towards the end to preserve my position. And this number 60% keeps coming up, but I had 60% of average chips going into day 2. So on day 2, so it started with 1,300 players. Day 2, there were approximately 150 people made it to the prizes, made it to day 2. So they were now going to play down from 150 to a final table of 9, which would be played on the following day and it would be broadcast live. It's still out there on YouTube.
Wow.
So I said, well, this is fantastic. I've got my 26,000, so I'm going to play. I'm not going to play conservatively. All the money is at the top. So you've got to take risks. You've got to play. You're better off, taking a risk and losing out on that risk than playing conservatively and fading out and getting one of the low prizes. To have a chance of winning the big prize, you must take appropriate risks again. Okay. So it was kind of snakes and ladders, Mario. I go up the ladder and then down the snake. But, I kept surviving and my chip stack was building. And meanwhile, the prizes were growing. The field was being cut now from 130 to 60 to 40 to 30 to 20. And then lo and behold, I'm still there with 10 players left. Wow. 9 make it through to the next day. And at this stage, I come into six-figure prizes, okay? And I'm sitting on the big blind. If you don't understand this, don't worry too much about it. For the poker people out there, they will enjoy this story. And I have Jack 8, which is, it's enough to say, okay, I'm on the big blind.
How many cards is this?
You get 2 cards, which are called the whole cards. Yeah. You see those, nobody else sees your cards. And then you share 5 community cards.
Yeah, so it's like it's stud with shared 5 cards.
Exactly. So you're trying to connect your 2 cards with the 5 cards.
So you Jack 8.
Form the best.
So Jack 8, I could see it straight here somewhere.
Jack 8, you could. But what happened actually was something very similar. Up comes the flop, and the flop is 8-8-2.
Okay? 3 8s.
So I go, I've trip 8, they call it. Okay, so I said, trip 8, that is just a dream hand, absolutely a dream hand. It's me against one other player, where heads up, as they call it. Okay, so I check, not showing any strength, and he bets, and I take my time and I call. Yeah. And next thing, an ace comes up, okay? And I could go, okay, he could have 2 aces, but it's very unlikely as 2 aces. You've got to be prepared to take a risk and not be running scared of that one combination that could get you. So I checked again, and I'm hoping he is the ace, which he very likely has. And he bets. So I go, lovely, take your time, pause. The heart is really pounding at this stage. And I called. Yeah. And next, a queen comes, and I said, you know what, Michael, that's a great card for you, because there's a fair chance he has an ace and a queen, which means he has 2 pair. Yeah,
strong pair. He thinks it's good.
He's really, really good, but I've got trips, which is bad.
And he thinks he might have jacks and 8s.
So I don't know where it came from, but I had the composure to take my time, check, and he really took his time. He bet sort of conservatively, trying to preserve something in case. And I went all in, and he took his time. He called, and up it pops straight away. Mixter, my online moniker. It said, Mixter, you are chip leader going into the final table tomorrow.
I feel like I've been in a game.
Oh,
the way you told it.
God, my heart was racing. I was jumping up and down. It was like 3 a.m.
Does that mean you're into the final 9?
I'm into the final 9. And like, I turned my phone on. It had been off for most of this. I turned my phone on and it popped. I had no idea, but the Irish lads got the word that Mixter... Michael Dwyer was going well in this event and was about to get an unprecedented score as far as online play in Ireland was concerned. So I got the beautiful messages, great messages right the way through the next day. But the next day I had to turn the phone off because I must prepare now. I must, must prepare for the final table. So this is just incredible. I've gone from $150 to a minimum payout now, I think, of $130,000 or something like that, but a maximum payout of about 1.68 million. Yeah. Second place payout of 1.3 million. Third place payout of $1 million. Wow. So I remember getting the front room together, and that was my sort of sanctuary, if you like, and it was clearly I had to have that to myself. And Karen and the girls were, my 2 of my daughters were in the kitchen at the back, and they were able to watch a delayed online version on YouTube, which is still out there. Okay. So they'd be watching this delayed stream. I could watch that too, and people would have people watching it for them or whatever. I just chose not to. I said I've got to stay in the zone. So I had spent the day just formulating a strategy by researching it very, very carefully. And business teaches you that, that if you have a strategy and you have a decision to make, well, does it conform with the strategy? Make that decision. Okay. If it doesn't, don't. And the strategy basically was, you've got a nice chip lead here, so you can put pressure on all of the other stacks. In poker they call it ICM, which basically translated means the other guys are all trying to survive, to ladder up, to get from the minimum price to the next price to the next price. But you've got more chips than them, so you can put them under pressure, and more often than not, they'll have to fold, So I exerted that pressure very, very firmly on them. But despite that, a few things went with me, a few things went against me. I made one bad decision, which the commentators lambasted me online for. I actually didn't think it was that bad, but they were too busy talking to each other while I was making lots of good decisions, But eventually there are 3 left. And Jonathan Jaffe turns around. He's a well-known player in American poker, and he's the co-commentator. He turns around and he says, well, if your name's Mixter and you're living in Ireland, you're Ireland's latest poker millionaire.
Well done.
And I go, wow, that's amazing. And there was this great intrigue online, which I only found out subsequently, but this chat was running. And in the chat, they were all on about, I love this old Irish geezer. I don't know how they knew it was an old Irish geezer, putting it up to the young Euro grinders, as they call them, these German kids living in Austria and whatever not, So, look, there are 3 left, and the top 2 have a big advantage over me, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm guaranteed $1 million, but you know what? I want to still win this thing, but I'm quite a bit behind. Next thing, the top 2 start going at each other.
Yeah.
Which is a really stupid thing for them to do.
Yeah.
And one knocks the other guy out.
God, now
and did me a huge favour.
You're 2 now.
His name is Dejan, and he's from Montenegro. Dejan, if you're listening, thanks again. He knocked the other guy out, and I hop up to 1.3 million.
God.
So he literally gifted me 300,000. It was just phenomenal. I met Dejan in Monaco at the European Poker Tour event in Monte Carlo.
Yeah.
And a huge guy. He was towering over me, and I'm tall, and he put his arm around me, and he said, you were some robust competitor. He said, you played a really aggressive game. And I said to him, I know I misplayed the king's hand against you, but I said, there was one other hand I remember, and I said, there was a flush draw that missed, and I bet into the river. And I said, I know I got that wrong. He said, was that the 6-7 hand? Of course, photographic memory. He remembered the hand exactly. He called me down with just the 3rd pair. And I said, I didn't bet enough. He said, absolutely, you made it too cheap. Had you gone all in, I'd have had to fold.
Right.
And that to me was the turning point.
Right.
He was a worthy winner, this guy. He's a serious professional.
Wow.
He's probably won 20 million online, I'm guessing.
Wow.
That
was an amazing story, Michael. And you really put me in the room there for that, right?
Oh, listen, I'm still back in the room. Poker is one of several funnels that I have, the others being startup investment. When I left the business, I said, I'm definitely going to invest in startups. That was partly a big back, a give back or a payback. I mean, a big back from pig's back, a payback from pig's back. But, I love that energy, and I wanted to be part of that energy. It's what attracted me into the space. So, I kind of, when you're investing in startups that you're going to lose a lot of it, if not all of it. I mean, if I came out anywhere near breaking...
Should you have been on Dragon's Den?
Oh, I don't know. I might have enjoyed it. Who knows, But you know what? We had a dinner a few weeks ago with about 10 startups that I'm involved in. I'm not invested in them all, but I'm invested in most of them. And the energy in that room was just fantastic.
Yeah.
But to give these young people, not all young people, one is James O'Connor is older than me. So James is into his 60s. Eddie Dillon must be into his 50s, but there's a lot of young people there. And so it's young and old, bumping off each other and, just a bit of wisdom.
Without being rude, have you made money out of some of your startups?
Not at all.
You haven't?
No, not at all. But, I'd be very hopeful that I will.
Oh, you will maybe, yeah.
These journeys, mine was a 20-year journey. You probably say, realistically, they're 10-year journeys. And I mean, 3 of them have gone down already. There was a guy there recently, I won't mention the name of the company or the name of the guy, but I always say to these guys, I'll be of most use to you when it goes wrong, because I understand that. We were so close to oblivion so many times, So I understand that, and I understand the pressures. And the reasons I didn't continue with the business or set up a new business of my own was I was done. I didn't have the stomach for another hour of it, Mario. I was depressed in myself. I probably shouldn't use that term because there are people who go through very serious depression, but I was extremely anxious. I was in a very bad place, and I really had to work on it very, very hard. Yeah. So my working on it was doing new things, And funny, I read something the other day, and it was talking about curiosity.
Yes.
And it said that curiosity is a great thing. Curiosity is a great, lift you out of anxiety and depression. But the word curiosity comes from cure or cura. It's it's the same Latin origins as those words, So it's great to be enthusiastic about learning, enthusiastic about new things. So my new things were writing my, bringing my journals together. I had a little art gallery going for a while in conjunction with a friend of mine, John Nolan, who's an artist. I embraced crypto in a big way. Like I really went down that rabbit hole. I wanted to learn it. It was a new technology. It was exciting. For me, it was like .com all over again. Yeah. And it's very easy to dismiss it, and people are dismissing it on this side, particularly in Ireland. I think people are, now there's a certain segment of the population who are embracing it and who will do very well from it. But there's a large segment, and particularly the older age cohort, who are very dismissive of it. But they're not opening their minds to it. They don't really understand it, and they're not putting in the work. You've got to put in the work, starting with reading the white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto, which led to Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin is really what crypto is about. It's 2/3 of crypto. And, all these casino rug pulls, ignore all of those. Just ignore it. Ignore it. That's like back to mindless gambling, Okay. But the serious stuff is Bitcoin, and everybody should be buying bits of Bitcoin and trying to keep them. That's not investment advice. It's just what I would say to my daughters, what I would say to my friends. But don't be looking at it every day. Just put it away. What's happening really is around us in the world is that governments are getting away with overspending. And they're creating these larger and larger deficits all the time. I think the deficit in America is now 37 trillion, and they're adding to it.
The national debt.
Exactly. And they're adding to it at the rate of about 3 trillion a year, So the way they do that is they print money, they print more dollars, and they manage to get them into the system through banks, or sometimes by giving subsidies to people, extra social welfare payments, extra payments to civil servants, and that leads to inflation. The more money there is in the system, the more inflation there is. So it really is contributing to this very nasty wealth inequality in our society, where if you're fortunate enough to have bought a house at the right time, that house, of course, is a finite asset. It's a scarce asset. It's going to grow in value relative to this currency that's just being printed. Or if you buy Bitcoin, there's only 21 million of them. There's probably less because the Satoshi Nakamoto block, I can't remember whether it was 1 million or 3 million. There's a big block of them anyway, which will never come back into circulation. Lots of them been lost over the year. There's probably 15 million Bitcoin really that could come into circulation, and they've been taken off the table all the time by the big boys. So you have a chance to front run the big boys before it goes crazy, But for the unfortunate people who don't buy assets or can't buy assets, and you don't need to be able to buy the house, you can buy your bit of Bitcoin, you can buy a bit of stock. My daughter in London spends her time persuading her friends to put 100 or 2 aside every month into equities, and she'll point them as to what they need to do, because she knows that over time they grow, and they just do grow, because assets grow in an environment where governments are getting away with printing too much currency.
Well, it's like if you look at, for example, the Dow Jones. The Dow Jones is relentlessly going to grow. So, for example, the Dow Jones 10 years ago is much, much bigger than it was now. So if you invested in the Dow Jones 10 years ago, you'd be making a large amount of money.
Now, if you express the Dow Jones in terms of gold, which is a somewhat limited asset, or in terms of Bitcoin, which is a very limited asset, you'll see it hasn't grown as much, because these assets obviously have also, they're finite, and it's the dollar is the problem, or the euro is the problem. So, I'm befuddled by what society should do, but there's a fundamental unfairness built in, and the sooner people see the light of that, and even in tenors and 20s and hundreds buy their assets, but good assets, finite assets. You can buy Bitcoin on Revolut $5 at a time. I'm not suggesting that's the best way to buy it, but it's not a bad way to buy it. You can go on to Coinbase and you can buy it, and they'll keep it for you. Or if you're very adventurous, you can try to store it yourself on these hardware wallets. I wouldn't trust myself, so I don't store it myself. I have mine put away in long-term storage. But view it as a long-term thing, and view it as your protection, your each-way bet against this system that is working against people who haven't got assets.
Right. We're reaching the end, because I wanted to tidy up some things for me here. One is we have something in common, that man in the arena thing.
Ah, yeah.
So you brought this in today, right? And I couldn't believe it when you said it. You had this thing, which is one of your, you love this whole passage written by Teddy Roosevelt.
That's right.
The man in the arena. But
in 1910.
In 1910, but it meant something very, very special to me as well, because about a year ago, in my own career, right, I sort of said, took a bit of a risk in my own career, and with my promoter and everything, I said, my promoter said, would you fancy doing the 3 Arena? And I went, well, are you asking? And he went, okay, I'm asking, but if you say yes, that means it's all in. We're going to try and sell the tickets to the 3 Arena.
Superb.
So we went for it. And all year I worked hard and I promoted it, and eventually we sold out the 3 Arena. But during that year I was obviously very, very worried. The nightmare is you wake up at night and you imagine you walk into this empty theatre, empty place in 3 and it's half full. You've lost loads of money and people go, he only half fill it, right? But I remember going through a lot of thoughts in my mind about going, I risked it, I tried it, I did it. Now eventually we sold it out.
Yeah, magnificent.
Right? But I remember during this thing...
Well, good on you. You took the risk and you got there.
I did, but the final thing was... Subsequently, I thought a lot about risk and how I respect so many people who don't get there and who yet have the balls to get up and do it again, right? So I found that quote, this passage by Teddy Roosevelt about how the man in the arena is what counts and not the people who stand by and the critics who stand on the fence. Would you have it? Would you like to read it to me?
Indeed I do.
Mom.
You know, and like Roosevelt, he was a man of the era, so everything is the man. And I'm not going to correct Roosevelt. You know, it was what it was. But as you said, he was an action man.
It was a long time ago.
And he really believed as well that, like, you know, people should get out there and take risks and engage in adventurous behaviour, but serve as well, you know. Like, he really had a strong sense of citizenship,
He did.
know, and what our responsibilities are in the context of a society, you know. So, like, you know, this is a small passage from a much bigger speech, which was citizenship.
I got it printed out. I got it enlarged, and I have it as a print framed on my wall.
Superb. Well, listen, I name my book after it. I live my life after it, and this is the passage. So it's from this passage is known as The Man in the Arena, and it's from Citizenship in a Republic by Theodore Roosevelt, delivered to the Sorbonne in Paris in April 1910. So I came across it on the occasion of the centenary. So it reads, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat."
Yeah, that's it.
Those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
He remarked there about critics. I mean, I understand that critics have to do their job as well, but Stephen Fry is very funny about this, the comedian. Yes. When he was asked about critics, he goes, "Why didn't I just ask them before I wrote it what to write? They could have told me. Why did I have to write it first and then they told me it was terrible? Why didn't I ask them first?"
Superb, superb.
And
it's a bit like, the hurlers on the ditch, wasn't it?
I suppose. But your book is From the Arena, an entrepreneur's journals. It's also called Entrepreneur's Journey in some editions. And this was your journey through the entrepreneur's life in Pigsback.
That's it.
It doesn't transfer to your life in poker, does it?
There's a brief mention in the prologue about my poker pursuits, but that's what I'm currently engaged in. Is hopefully writing the.
Brilliant.
Well, I have written it, but I've just got to sort of finish it.
Where can I find the thing online? YouTube.
You'll get the book on Amazon or on Audible, isn't it? You know, the audio book, which I sat through hours reading out, but really enjoyed. And online, YouTube. If you look up YouTube, GG Poker Super Millions,
GG Poker Super Millions,
and maybe Jonathan Jaffe, Jaffe, because he was the co-commentator. It should come up, and it'll say 13 million on the graphic because there was a 13 million
Brilliant.
total prize pool.
Brilliant.
And it's a bit of a laugh.
Michael, what an interesting life you're having, and I can't wait now to see what happens in further games. It's clear that it really, it's a very exciting life, and your adrenaline is flying.
There we are.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Pleasure talking to you. Yeah, cheers, Mario.
Fantastic. And my thanks to Michael Dwyer for coming in and talking to me about his fascinating life, and I intend to keep following him online on YouTube to see how he goes in these big poker games. My thanks, of course, to you. If you want to contact me, it's mariorosenstock@gmail.com for anything that you want to talk to me about. Guests, sketches, compliments, constructive criticism, anything you want. mariorosenstock@gmail.com. My thanks, of course, to our sponsor, deluxebathrooms.ie, Little Island Retail Park, Cork and Dundalk Retail Park, of course. Super August All-Star Sale ends on Monday, Bank Holiday Monday. And if you can, tell one other person about this podcast if you enjoyed it. See you same time, same place next week.